Welcome back. A new report in the New York Times highlights growing questions about President Biden's age as he seeks re-election. The new piece states this: Mr. Biden is the chief executive of the world's most powerful nation and has just embarked on a campaign asking voters to keep him in the White House until age 86, drawing more attention to an issue that polls show troubles most Americans and is the source of enormous anxiety among party leaders. The paper goes on to report that some officials in the Biden administration acknowledge they make what they consider reasonable accommodations not to physically tax the president. That includes scheduling most of his public appearances between noon and 4 p.m. and leaving him alone on weekends as much as possible. At the same time, the president has said that age is a legitimate issue, but maintains his longevity is an asset, not a liability. In fact, he went on to tell guests at the recent White House Correspondents Association dinner, quote, "You say I'm ancient, I say I'm wise." Joining us now is one of the authors of that extensive piece, Chief White House Correspondent for the New York Times, Peter Baker. Peter, thanks for joining us this morning. This is a significant storyline. As much as White House officials like to publicly poo-poo it, polls suggest that age is a top concern among voters, including Democrats who really like President Biden, who like the job he's done, but they say, well, we worry he's too old to do it again. So talk to us a little bit more about how the White House and the campaign, how they plan to approach this issue as the president plans to face voters again.
Yeah, I mean, we wanted to do this piece is kind of go look at the actual reality, get past the rhetoric and the easy jokes and all of that, and look at what's real, right? And what's real and what's not. And what I think we've found is, of course, a more complicated reality, which is you have a president who is, in fact, very experienced, probably the most experienced person ever to hold the office. And he showed just last week with this debt ceiling deal that he's able to still bring people together and pass complicated legislation. Even Kevin McCarthy, his Republican antagonist, the Speaker of the House, said he was very tough, very on top of this negotiation. At the same time, we saw on the very same day that the Senate passed that bill, he fell, of course, at the Air Force Academy. Looked very embarrassing and a bad optic, the kind of optic that White House aides really cringe at and are worried about. Not that anybody couldn't fall. Anybody can fall. You get tripped over a sandbag, whether you're 50 or 80, but it's a bad look when you're 80 because it raises the questions that they don't want to have to focus on. And that question is, of course, not just how he is today, but how he would be all the way until the end of a second term if he were to have it. Now, are they going to make accommodations for him? You haven't seen him, as you pointed out with Darlene a few minutes ago, you haven't seen him making a particularly vigorous campaign schedule yet. They say he will have that. He has been, of course, traveling internationally, pretty arduous trips. I was with him just a few weeks ago in Japan. They plan to show him to be as vigorous as possible, but make the case that it's the accomplishments that matter more than, is his gait slowing and can he sometimes momentarily forget a word or a name or something like that.
Yeah, and White House officials and leading Democrats alike point to his record and say, look, he's doing a terrific job. But, Peter, take us behind closed doors. Party leaders, whether Democratic donors, prominent Wall Street Democrats, what are they saying privately? How big of a concern is the president's age and what the alternative could be?
Well, it's the concern. I hear it all the time. I don't think I ever speak with any Democrat who doesn't raise that issue. Not that we raise it, they raise it, and I know that there are people in the White House and around President Biden who would like to think this is just a creation of the media or the Republicans. It's really not. I hear from almost every Democrat I talk to. There was a dinner recently it was told about between, former governors and senators, all of whom are roughly in Biden's generation. All of them thought, no, he shouldn't be running. He's too old at this point. There, is the Wall Street, major figure we talked to who said every single donor for the Democratic Party that they speak with, in fact, brings this issue up. The White House gets calls from local officials asking about the president's health. I mean, it's a constant concern among Democrats. Again, as you point out rightly, they all, for the most part, like the president. He's got strong support within the party. They think he's doing a good job. They like his policies. They're just concerned about where this goes from here. And as you point out rightly, it's the alternative. That's the issue, because they don't perceive an obvious alternative. Kamala Harris is the vice president. A lot of people like her, but she hasn't, in fact, convinced many top Democrats that she's ready for the job, if in fact it comes to that, and that's a concern. Who then would step up should they have to think about a plan B.
Yeah, and it's unavoidable that age will be a major issue in this campaign. We should note Donald Trump, the leading Republican, he's only a couple years younger than Joe Biden, but other Republicans in the field, decades. So we will, of course, be following this. And you're right, this is a storyline, even if the White House and some Democrats don't want to hear about it on Twitter. Chief White House correspondent for the New York Times, Peter Baker, thank you for the reporting and for being with us this morning.